Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity of being allowed to speak this morning here, and I thank the organizers for inviting me. And I think what I was going to talk about was very nicely introduced by Saurav Srivastav already. So I'll follow up what he was saying. I think we can think of the responsibility of any business enterprise to the society at, do I have to hold it closer to that?
Yeah, that's better.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There's an art of nightclub singing, which I haven't quite acquired, but that's required basically to kiss the microphone, as far as I can see. The responsibility could be divided up into different levels. I think the term global figures here, but so far the discussion has tended to be mainly about national rather than global. But there is a global issue too. So there's a global issue, there's a national issue, there's a local issue. And one can think about responsibilities at each of these levels. And I'll say a little bit about each of them in this very brief presentation. As Saurav said, in many ways the IT industry, information communication, the great revolution taking place in India on that, partly connected with the rest of the world, but partly also in some ways leading that. It has had great impact at some levels already, and that's true both at the local level as well as national and global level. The concern that Mr. Srivastav particularly emphasized is the question not how it affects distribution in general, but what it does to the least fortunate of the society. I like that focus. That was the focus of my talk too, 2 days ago. And I'm delighted that the IT sector has been always quite aware that there exists this problem to be consciously, deliberately addressed. Now, what we have to think about in this context is that what is it that the IT sector has which can help in this? I think the resources that the IT center had could be divided into 3 different types. There are the intellectual resources, the ability to solve difficult problems, the ability to understand difficult problems, the ability to analyze them. There's financial, it's a successful sales sector. And there is also, and this must not be forgotten, the IT sector has always really heralded its success based on taking new initiative. And I think one of the things that's lacking in the responsibility front is a lack of initiative, partly because it isn't quite clear whose responsibility it is. At some level it's ought to be the government, but the government has a hell of a lot of things to do. And I think the initiative question is, in my judgment, extremely important. Even in a very small way, when I set up our Too Little Foundation, Too Little Trust with the, what is after all very small, chicken feed Nobel Prize money between Bangladesh and India. The fact of the matter is that some of the changes that we have been able to take some satisfaction in were carried out with not that much resource at all, but just taking the initiative. One of them, for example, in the Bangladesh case, is mainly to see how the rural reporting of the conditions of the worst off people, how it could be come out more in the national papers, like the leading papers, Prothomalo, Songbad, Daily Star, and so on. And here there was a kind of fertile ground the newspapers were quite happy to carry this. There were young women leaving school, not particularly keen on university education, very keen on doing work of this kind, and the amount of money that was needed to buy them a camera and support them for a year to go into the deep rural areas of Bangladesh and report from them and write to them, write about what they see there. And they were all, in some ways, women's perspective, but there's not always women's problems. The problems are that of men and women generally. But there was a kind of departure from the standard ways of looking at and reporting of what's going on in the rural areas. And not so surprisingly when one thinks about it, but though initially it came to me as a surprise, that the leading Bangladeshi papers, both Bengali and English, seemed very keen on carrying it. So there was a lot of the papers were covered with these reports. Now I think 8 or 9 of our fellows, it's only a 4-year-old program now, has already are now part of staff member in the established newspapers. Changing really in some ways the type of journalism on reporting on deprivation, particularly those things which are not dramatic in the sense, not hunger, not a railway crash, not a flood, but a kind of day in and day out hunger, the drainage not working and has not been working for the last 25 years, not news additionally, at the same time reports intensive reporting on that. I think similarly the work that the Indian Trust has tended to do has concentrated on finding how difficult the accountability problem in schooling and healthcare is.